Here's a quick mini lesson on probability. So probability in math is basically how likely something is to happen. So if you have what we call events, or things like rolling a dice, flipping a coin, drawing a card, those are all very classic examples of events that we can kind of predict mathematically what's going to happen. So a quick reminder that in general, probability is equal to the number of ways an event could happen. I'll show you an example in a second. Over the total number of outcomes. So, for example, if we think about a six-sided dice, so a dice like this one where we roll it once, and I might ask you, or you might be asked something like, what is the probability of rolling a 2? Well, a six-sided die only has each number 1 through 6 once, so the probability of rolling any of those numbers, or for example a 2, would be 1 and 6, because we can only roll a 2 one way. There's only one possible way to roll a 2, and there are 6 total numbers on the die. Or I could ask you something like, what's the probability of rolling an even number on the die? So a 2, a 4, or a 6. So in that case, if you're going to roll an even number, there are 3 even numbers. So that's the number of ways the event can happen. And again, there are 6 possible outcomes on the die. So you would say that the probability of rolling rolling a even number is 3 out of 6, or 3/6, or 1/2. So we can represent probability on what we call a probability line, which is very much like a number line that goes from 0 to 1. At the far left at 0, these are we would describe probability if it was 0 as being impossible, meaning that it's not going to happen. Okay, so we can represent 0 as just a number, 0. We could represent it as a percent, 0%, or there's no way that outcome could occur out of the total number of outcomes. So on this number line or probability line, we are going to represent our probabilities with decimal numbers, with percents, and with fractions, and with words. So if 0 is impossible, then 1 is basically the opposite. So in math, we call, if something is definitely going to happen, we would call it certain. Okay, so that would be 1. It would be 100% chance of something happening, or as a fraction, I guess probably the simplest way would be like 1 over 1, or 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100. It doesn't matter as long as the top, the numerator, and the bottom are the same. And then right in the middle, we would have 0.5. If you were going to represent 0.5 as a percent, that would be 50%. And as a fraction, simplest form would be 1/2, or 5 out of 10, 50 out of 100, however many possible outcomes you've got. And in this range here, we would say it's even chance or equally likely. Either language is fine. Then you could maybe think like in this range from 0 to 0.5, maybe halfway through there, you would have 0.25 or 25% chance, or maybe 1 in 4, for example, or 25 out of 100. We would still say that this is an unlikely chance of that event occurring. Okay, so if you think back to the rolling of the die question, there was a 1 in 6 chance of rolling a 2. That's even less than 25%, so that would fall somewhere like in the range between 0 and 0.25. So you can start plotting where events would be. And then lastly, over here, you can probably guess what I'm going to put in between 0.5 and 1, maybe 0.75. That's like a 75% chance of something happening. We would maybe call that 3/4. And then here we would say that something that is 75% chance of happening would be likely. So some things to remember with this is that probability is just a guide. It doesn't tell us exactly what's going to happen for sure, but it can help us make predictions about things and try and make sense of some of the different events, probability events that we are seeing. Hopefully this brings back some memories about probability in the past.